Hello and welcome to Community Chats. I'm Aley Hammer, and today we're joined with Chris Thompson, the co-founder and CEO from Amber Electric. Chris, I'm stoked to have you on the show today because I just read, actually, as I woke up this morning, that you guys have won the Governor of Victoria Startup of the Year award. That's so cool. Congratulations. Can you start by telling our audience a little bit about Amber Electric and your background as well?
Yeah, thanks, Aley. We're really humbled by this. I mean, I think at the end of the day, but we don't actually do anything ourselves. It's all our customers' work and all our customers making an impact. So it's a real tribute, I think, to us having the most amazing customers of anyone in the energy business. Amber really started from an observation about where we are right now in our energy transition. So increasingly, we're starting to power Australia by wind and by sun, which is amazing, right? But obviously, it's not always windy and it's not always sunny. And so increasingly, the challenge we're starting to see in the overall energy grid is that we actually can't integrate more renewables into the grid. So we're actually running to the actual limits of how much wind and sun we can actually get in the energy grid. And so that's really where Amber comes in. So we're an entirely new way to buy power. And so we pass through real-time wholesale prices directly through to customers. So what happens in our wholesale energy market is that when it's windy and sunny, we get these renewables flooding into the grid and pushing down wholesale prices. And then at other times when we're relying on coal and gas, electricity gets much more expensive. So what we do with the Amber is we actually pass through those real-time wholesale prices directly through to customers, and we provide them the transparency to be able to actually see what's going on in the grid. And so customers can actually start to use power at those cheaper and greener times, which saves them money and actually builds demand for renewables at the same time. I started my career at Boston Consulting Group. So I was working for large corporates here in Australia, as well as throughout Southeast Asia a little bit. I was briefly actually an investment banker before that, but I made a much better consultant than banker. And then after a few years of consulting, I actually took a pretty hard right turn. So I moved to Iran, and I spent 2 years in Iran building an e-commerce company there. So basically trying to build the Amazon of Iran, which was a pretty wild journey, as you can imagine. I joined that company about 6 months after it had launched and ended up becoming one of the 2 managing directors. And we grew that up to about 400 people on the team.
Wow. I mean, you have such an interesting background. I'm absolutely astonished by everything you've accomplished. And I would really love to hear one day a little bit more about your time in Iran. That's so cool. But Chris, Amber Electric, to get back on track, is doing some amazing work in the clean energy space. So I wanted to ask you, how is Amber Electric redefining end consumer behavior for clean energy?
Yeah, so we're really on a mission to bring Australia to 100% renewables. And increasingly, one of the most powerful ways that we can do that is to actually help customers shift when they use energy. So, back in the old days when it was mostly a coal and gas fired grid, it didn't really matter when you turn things on. The coal and gas would ramp up and ramp down just based on demand. But when you're dealing in a world powered by renewables, it doesn't work that way anymore. When it's windy and sunny, you get this cheap wholesale energy coming to the grid. And then at other times when it's not windy and sunny, you have to rely on this dirty coal and gas. So what we're actually doing is giving people the transparency about what's going on in the wholesale and in the overall grid and how much of their power is coming from renewables at any given point in time. And then increasingly, we're helping customers to automatically use more power at those cheaper and greener times. So the biggest focus that we have is actually looking at large devices such as home batteries or electric cars, where we actually automate those devices to automatically turn on and charge when it's cheap and green, and automatically turn off or even potentially discharge back into the grid when it's dirty and expensive. And so you really see this playing out, I think, most acutely when you look at something like an electric car. So if you're buying an electric car, which is an amazing thing to be able to do for the environment, then if you're coming home and charging that at 6 o'clock every night, you're basically running your car on coal and gas, right? Why would you do that? You've gone from oil to coal and gas, which is maybe a bit of an improvement, but not a big one. But if you're actually charging that EV in the middle of the night on a nice windy night, or during the middle of the day when it's coming almost entirely from solar, then all of a sudden you're running that EV on 80% plus renewable energy, which obviously then you're really starting to make a much bigger difference than if you're just relying on coal and gas.
Yeah, 100%. We actually last month we've had solar for a while, but we got a battery put in, a Tesla battery, and it's so fascinating. I've got the app on my phone and I'm forever, looking at when it's peak time, and it's pretty amazing. But as you say, the time when you choose to turn on the dishwasher and charge your car is so critical, because as you say, if you're doing it when it's not sunny for us, with solar, you're just using coal and gas again. So 100%.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think we're also starting to see this and seeing this sort of distributed energy revolution start to happen is people like yourself to be able to actually automate that battery to actually start to compete in the market and drive out that coal and gas, right?
Yeah.
So at the moment, the coal and gas plants are often waiting till the sun is about to set to then start to ramp up their prices and charge you more. But if you've got a battery, then all of a sudden you can sort of entirely reverse that, flip that around and start actually earning those prices for yourself with your battery rather than, and at the same time powering your neighbors with that stored solar, which is way better than having to rely on that coal and gas.
So cool. The apps are pretty phenomenal as well. Like being able to see that data and being able to monitor it hour by hour, or actually second by second, is pretty cool. So 100%. Chris, I wanted to ask you, because Amber Electric recently went through a re-architecture on AWS. It's really important to handle those peaky workloads for wholesale energy prices. So can you tell us a little bit more about the ups and downs of peaky workloads?
Yeah, absolutely. So the energy market is an incredibly dynamic market. I believe it's actually one of the most dynamic commodity market in the whole world, is the Australian energy market. And because so much of what we do is driven by the market, we need to have a really dynamic and flexible engineering and product setup as well. So we have a really event-driven architecture, and we rely heavily on the serverless sort of frameworks and a serverless sort of architectural style. So a lot of lambdas, a lot of queues, a lot of off-the-shelf products from AWS. So we recently, I feel like every 6 to 9 months we run into a new bottleneck on part of it, and so we have to keep doubling down again and again on how do we make sure we get this architecture really lean, because we may find ourselves during a price event in the market where a giant coal plant may trip and the whole grid is on edge, and where potentially you're going to be seeing people lose power. And at those point in time, we want to be dispatching all our batteries, making sure that we're controlling all the devices we can control to try and help keep the power on for everyone, as well as minimize people's prices. And so that means we need to be taking all those actions within the space of 1, 2, 3 seconds, right? As soon as we get that notification about what's happening in the market, we need to be able to respond incredibly quickly and respond across tens of thousands of customers and devices. So to be able to do that, we rely heavily on the AWS infrastructure and systems to be able to take in these actions and then very rapidly at times scale up to tens of thousands of different lambdas running simultaneously to try and get those out and get the notifications and responses out to devices and customers as well.
It's really cool. I mean, obviously it's amazing that you've been able to deliver better experiences and products as a result of the partnership. But, if I think of like the best use case for an AWS kind of customer, it really is this volatile ups and down customer. So thank you so much for sharing. Chris, to round up this interview, what future technologies are you excited about that will help catapult Australia's pathway into this 100% renewable future kind of goal that we've got at the moment?
I mean, I've mentioned them a little bit before already in the chat, but the number one device that is going to change the whole game here is electric vehicles. Yeah. An electric vehicle often has usually has a battery that is 5 to 10 times the size of a typical home battery, and fully charged provides for the average house enough power to be able to run for 3 to 4 days independently. And as we start to get that fleet of electric cars across Australia rolling up and up, we're likely to get to the point, probably in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, where that fleet of electric cars are by far and away the biggest generation asset in the country. And so this opportunity of being able to power your home from your EV, and kind of the classic image we have is you drive to work during the day, your business has solar installed on the roof, you plug your EV in at work, there you charge from that cheap solar energy coming in from your work and from the grid during the day. You come home, you arrive home, you plug your car back in at sort of 6 o'clock, and all of a sudden you're powering your house from your car now, and a vehicle to grid is kind of that term, and that's increasingly becoming available here in Australia as well. And so you're powering your grid, you're carrying your house from that car, you're starting to power your neighbor's house from that car as well, and starting to make sure they're really driving that coal out by this whole fleet of EVs. You're discharging into the grid at 6 o'clock each night. And then as the wind starts to blow overnight, maybe you top your car up a little bit more. As you wake up in the morning, your car kicks back in and starts powering your house again. And then the cycle just continues. And really, I think what we're likely to see in Australia is this mix of solar plus EVs being kind of the dominant source of energy for the country, which is going to be this incredible sort of diverse distributed future there that's going to be really amazing to see.
I agree. It's such an exciting space. You're clearly so passionate about it. I'm still learning, but I find it so fascinating as well. It is a complete game changer, and it's so important to start building now, actually, so we can start utilizing that technology as soon as it does become more affordable and available in Australia. So thank you so much for educating me, for educating our audiences, and we absolutely love you guys as a customer. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Aley.
Thanks, Chris.